At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. What's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's begin. For a man about to be executed, Milo Cass was surprisingly preoccupied with the architectural sins being committed around him. Milo had seen worse throne rooms, but this one ranked in the top 5 for sheer, unadulterated gaudiness. Gold-plated pillars tall enough to scrape the sky of a small moon and seemingly stolen from a deity's washroom supported a vaulted ceiling painted with garish frescoes of the room's current occupant. Massive, ego-carved statues of the king in various heroic poses flanked the central walkway. Every surface, from the floor tiles to the light fixtures, was polished to a blinding sheen, a monument to awful taste and galactic-scale insecurity. Chains bit into his wrist. 2 guards, each the size of an industrial compactor and built from equal parts muscle and lacquered overlapping plates that hissed with microsurfers, shoved him forward. He stumbled, and the scuff of his worn boots echoed in the cavernous space. At the far end, lounging on a throne that was less furniture and more a geological formation of precious metals, sat King Vral. 10 feet of arrogant muscle packed into a crimson uniform. Vral's upper 2 arms were crossed over a chest broad enough to land a shuttle on, while a lower hand idly stroked a jeweled armrest. He looked down his long, rigid nose at Milo, a smirk that played on his thin lips. The assembled court, a menagerie of sycophants and bootlickers from across the sector, all draped in fine silks and armor that threw back the light in sharp, fractured patterns, tittered with amusement.
"Behold, my loyal subjects,"
Vral's voice boomed, and the sound dripped with condescension.
"the great and terrible saboteur, the grit in the gears of the Gravemoth Syndicate. I present to you this."
He gestured with his free lower hand, a dismissive flick of the wrist. The court erupted in dutiful laughter. Milo just sighed. He was tired. The last 2 rotations of constant motion blurred behind him. He ran, he hid, he consumed enough stimulants to make a jump freighter's engine jittery. He had attempted to siphon a little fuel from a weapons transport, a simple job that unraveled with spectacular speed. They captured him without his tool belt, without his jacket, without a single credit to his name. Utterly, frustratingly unprepared.
"Look at it,"
Vral continued, clearly enjoying the spectacle.
"A human so fragile, so small. 2 arms. How does he even dress himself in the morning? It is a pest, nothing more, dragged from the bilges of my mighty fleet."
Milo raised an eyebrow. "It's the leverage you get, pal," he muttered under his breath. "Not the length of the handle." A guard behind him cuffed him on the back of the head.
"Silence, creature."
"My point is," Milo grunted, tasting blood, "my species stacked pyramids and flew to our moon with slide rules and stubbornness. You lot probably needed a logic engine to figure out how to stack these ugly gold bricks." Vral's smirk tightened. He leaned forward, and his 4 eyes narrowed.
"You have a mouth on you, human. A flaw we will correct. But first, a lesson. A demonstration for all to see what true power is."
Vral gestured grandly to a black plinth beside his throne. Upon it rested a crown. It was no delicate or ornate thing, of dark, swirling metal that seemed to drink the light around it, a piece that looked less like jewelry and more like a critical component from a singularity drive.
The crown of Grave March,
Vrall declared, his voice echoing with manufactured reverence.
forged in the heart of a gravity well, from an alloy so dense a thimbleful would outweigh this scrawny creature. It is a symbol, yes, but it is also a test, a testament to the strength of the krill. Only a true king, a being of immense power and fortitude, can even bear its weight.
He let the statement settle, a thick, self-congratulatory quiet filling the space his voice had occupied. Milo stared at the crown, unimpressed. It looked like a glorified paperweight. A very, very heavy paperweight, sure, but a paperweight nonetheless.
On my coronation day,
Vrall boasted, his chest puffing out,
I lifted it with a single hand, a feat no other has managed. It is the foundation of my rule, strength absolute and undeniable.
He then fixed his gaze on Milo, a distinct predatory cruelty surfacing in his 4 eyes. This was the moment he'd built towards, the final humiliation.
Go on, creature. As a final amusement before your processing, try to lift it. Show them all the gulf that lies between a king and a pest.
The guards unchained Milo and gave him a hard shove toward the plinth. He stumbled and caught himself before he face-planted in front of the galaxy's worst-dressed dictator. He shot them a glare over his shoulder before he shuffled forward. Whispers and snickers rippled throughout the court. This would be hilarious. The tiny human, crushed by the mere symbol of their master's power. Milo reached the plinth. He took a deep breath, a mechanic's habit before tackling the stubborn bolt. He had humped enough busted fusion cores and power converters in his life to know about lifting heavy objects. Bend at the knees, not the back. Get a good grip. He wrapped his hands around the cold, dense metal. He braced himself and expected a force that would staple him to the floor. He grunted and put his back and hips into it, a lifetime of hauling heavy junk packed into one solid heave. And it lifted. The weight was substantial. It felt like hoisting a gravcar's power cell, an awkward, dense, uncomfortable load. But it rose from the plinth. Vrall had described a crushing, planet-like mass. This was merely heavy. Surprised at his own success, Milo straightened up, the crown held in a steady, two-handed grip. He blinked. Well, that was anticlimactic. For a final theatrical flourish of his own, he shifted his weight and balanced it in the palm of one hand. It took some effort, his biceps strained, but he held it steady. He looked up at Vrall and gave a small, tired shrug. The throne room's noise vanished. The quiet that fell was absolute, a sudden, sharp void where sound ceased to exist. The titters, the whispers, the sycophantic breaths all stopped. Every eye in the room, from the lowest scribe to the king himself, was wide with disbelief. Vrall's jaw, which had been set in a smug grin, hung open. His 4 eyes blinked in unison, a slow, confused motion. Milo stood there. He held the ludicrously heavy hat in one hand. He felt like he'd just ruined the punchline to a joke he didn't understand. A single high-pitched shriek of pure terror shattered the silence. It came from a slender, robed advisor standing near the throne, a Vec with an antennae that trembled violently. His scream had nothing to do with a heavy object being lifted. He understood the technical implications. The crown's weight was public theater. The true security was a synaptic scrambler, an elegant and deadly system designed with a single binary function. It scanned for the precise, narrow-band cognitive frequency of a high-gravity krill. On detection of that frequency, it allowed attunement. On detection of any other frequency, it issued a lethal signal that flash-fried the user's brain. There was no third option. The human brain operated on a different principle. It produced a chaotic storm, a broad-spectrum broadcast of messy, overlapping thoughts, emotions, and biological noise. The Crown's simple security system bypassed it entirely. It interrupted the chaotic, multi-layered signal as something outside the user authentication safeguards, a root-level diagnostic check, a developer's key. The human brain acted as a master key, a skeleton key, and a locksmith's entire toolkit all at once. It functioned as a biological rootkit. The screaming advisor knew the system. In its failure to kill the human, had handed him the kingdom. Milo, now the uncomfortable center of a galaxy-class awkward quiet, decided to lean into it. If execution was imminent, he might as well go out with style. With a casual shrug, he plopped the crown on his head. It settled over his greasy hair with a solid clunk. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft green light pulsed from the metal and washed over his face. A faint hum vibrated directly into his skull, and a stream of data, cool and clean, flooded his mind. The data stream felt less like a voice and more like an instinctive understanding. Diagnostic signature detected. User safeguards bypassed. Root access granted. Welcome, Administrator. Milo cocked his head, and the heavy crown tilted with him. He looked at the slack-jawed King Vraw. "Fits fine," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a plasma torch through butter. "Bit heavy, though. You should try cardio." That did it. The spell of disbelief shattered. Vraw let out a roar of pure, incandescent rage that rattled the gold-plated decorations on the walls. It was the sound of absolute power meeting an absolute contradiction.
Guards! Kill him! Tear that thing off his head and bring it to me!
Dozens of guards in heavy armor surged forward, their plasma rifles rising. Milo's heart hammered against his ribs. His life was a cascade of questionable choices, but this one felt monumental. He acted on a surge of pure, panicked instinct. A desperate, silent scream formed in his own mind. "Get me out of here." The Crown responded and fed him a sense of the palace's network systems. Cling! A 10-ton blast door to his left, part of the palace's central security grid, slammed shut and cut off a flanking group of guards. The automated security turrets on the ceiling swiveled to aim at him, then suddenly retracted into their housings with a series of apologetic-sounding whirs. A wave of confusion rippled through the charging guards. Milo grinned, a feral, desperate expression. He had no tools, but he was far from helpless. He vaulted over a fallen guard who tripped in the confusion and snatched a heavy multi-wrench from the guard's utility belt. He spotted a wall-mounted emergency kit a few feet away, shattered the glass with a sharp crack of his elbow, and grabbed the first thing he saw, a roll of industrial synth tape. He was back in business. He lunged to the side and ripped a thick power conduit from the wall with a shower of sparks. He palmed the guard's stun grenade during the initial scuffle, a little souvenir. His hands moved with a familiar swiftness, a blur of motion born from years of field repairs, as he taped the grenade to the sparking end of the conduit. An improvised explosive. Classic. He spun, whipped the cracking contraption end over end, and hurled it toward a massive, hideous stained glass window that depicted King Vraw wrestling a multi-tentacled space squid. The small explosion was perfectly placed. The window shattered and rained down a kaleidoscope of sharp, colorful Vraw and squid fragments, an open path to the outer spires of the palace. Freedom, or at least a slightly longer and more scenic fall to his death. "Later, losers!" he yelled and vaulted through the opening. The crown was a cheat code for the Syndicate's mainframe. As Milo sprinted through the gilded corridors of Vraw's fortress, the crown fed him a constant stream of information, schematics of the network security, Patrol routes logged in the central server the location of the nearest functioning restroom. He didn't know how he processed it. It just appeared in his head as natural as breathing. He sought a ship, not an exit, and for that he needed a pilot, or at least a keycard. His new internal GPS pointed him towards the detention block. That seemed a good place to find someone with a grudge against the king. He skidded to a halt in front of a heavy cell door. Inside, he could see two figures. One was a Vec warrior, tall and lean, with forearms crossed over her chest and a glare that could curdle milk. She had the hard, cynical look of someone who had seen it all and been disappointed by most of it. The other was a tiny, furry creature, maybe 2 feet tall, with huge, expressive eyes, who currently tried to pick the cell's lock with a spoon he had apparently hidden somewhere on his person. Standing guard outside the cell was a hulking, bipedal warbot, its single red optic glowing. Unit designation 739er. Standard issue syndicate crowd control. Dumb as a bag of bolts, but tough. Milo lacked time for a fight. He focused on the cell door's electronic lock, which he now sensed was tied into the network. He thought, open, and the cell door hissed aside. The Vec, Tala, looked from the open door to Milo, her eyes locked onto the glowing crown on his head. Her cynical expression didn't vanish, but a flicker of calculation appeared in her eyes. Opportunity. She sized him up in a split second, the scrawny human, the improbable crown, the chaos that echoed from the throne room, and decided this was the best and probably only shot at freedom she would ever get. The furry creature, Crix, simply saw an open door and a convenient distraction. He dropped his spoon and chirped, a series of high-pitched clicks and whistles that a translator device on his collar rendered in a booming, dramatic baritone.
Behold, all salvation arise, cloaked in this visage of a malnourished primate.
Milo ignored him and focused on the bot. Hey, Tin Can! Unit 7399er swiveled its head, its weapon arms powered up.
Halt. You're an unauthorized life form. Cease your existence immediately.
Yeah, about that. Milo ducked under a clumsy swing of its cannon arm. He was a mechanic, not a slicer. He did hardware, not software. He slapped the side of the bot's chassis and popped open a standard maintenance panel with a practiced thwack. Inside was a mess of wires and processors. There, a faint red glow marked the mass-produced inhibitor chip that shackled off the bot's core AI to its simplistic, brutal programming. With the dexterity of a surgeon, if surgeons use greasy, oversized wrenches, he hooked the tool around the chip and pulled. The chip came free with a nasty crunch of silicone. Niner froze. Its red optic flickered, then went dark. For a 3 count, it was just a statue. Then the optic glowed to life again, this time a cool, analytical blue. Rebooting. Its monotone voice announced, devoid of its previous aggression. Behavioral inhibitors offline. Personality network corrupted. Query. Why is my primary directive now to assist the skinny, loud organism wearing the fancy hat? Because I just gave you a lobotomy and a promotion, Milo said and clapped the bot on its middle shoulder. Welcome to the winning team. Now, let's get you out of here.
This is a suicide pact with bad aerodynamics, not a plan!
Tala yelled over the scream of the repulsor lift engine. They were on hijacked guard hoverbikes. They blasted out of the shattered stained-glass window and into the neon-drenched canyons of the Grave March Citadel. Milo drove, Tala clung on for dear life behind him, and Crix was strapped to her back, occasionally trying to snatch jewels off the passing architecture. Niner had its own bike, which it piloted with an unnerving robotic steadiness. Milo weaved through the traffic.
My analysis indicates this plan has a 12.4% chance of success.
Niner's voice crackled over their comms.
I find these odds stimulating.
Syndicate protocol ships swarmed behind them like angry wasps. A T-7 interceptor, faster and more agile than the others, was glued to their tail and peppered their shields with laser fire.
Milo, that model, the T-7,
Tala shouted in his ear.
Its port-sided intake is a design flaw. It's unshielded. Hit it and the whole engine block will seize.
A little busy here, Milo yelled back as he dodged under a low-hanging sky bridge.
I'll give you an opening.
Tala twisted around, her stolen plasma rifle barking. She aimed for the T-7's maneuvering thrusters, not the kill, and forced it into a predictable, clumsy correction.
Now!
She screamed. Milo banked the hoverbike hard, a move that felt suspiciously like he tried to torque a bolt in a zero-G environment. He instinctively thought, "Don't get shot, find a way out," and the crowd responded. On the city's traffic control network, their bikes suddenly registered a high-priority medical transport. Patrols in their path were rerouted. Billboards flickered and created temporary blind spots for their pursuers. A garbage scow inexplicably dumped its load directly in the path of the lead patrol ship, which swerved and collided with the T-7 right on its vulnerable port intake. The interceptor's engine flared violently and died. It sent the ship spinning into a skyscraper. Milo grinned. The universe's municipal grid was suddenly on his side. My analysis indicates municipal security grids are suffering from a 73% cascade failure along a projected trajectory, Niter noted dryly. Curious.
Good eye, Tala.
Milo shouted.
Just drive, you overgrown calculator.
She yelled back, though he thought he heard a note of respect in her voice.
Behold, my magnificent meat shield charges forth.
Crix's translator chirped with glee. Their destination was a glittering beacon of chaos in the distance, the planet's massive, continent-sized commercial spaceport. If they could make it there, they might just stand a chance to disappear. They didn't land at the spaceport. They crashed. They ditched the smoking hoverbikes behind a stack of cargo containers and sprinted into the swirling chaos of the main concourse. It was a river of 1,000 different species, a cacophony of 100 different languages, the perfect place to hide for about 5 minutes. Syndicate security forces, clad in their telltale black and silver armor, already fanned out. Their helmeted heads scanned the crowds. They were cornered. "New plan?" Tella asked, her voice tight as she reloaded her rifle. Milo's eyes darted around, his mind raced. His gaze landed on a lightly guarded docking bay. Inside sat a Syndicate patrol cruiser, a sleek, shark-like vessel, probably used for customs enforcement. It was a fast ship with guns. "Yeah," Milo said, a manic grin spread across his face. "Grand Theft Starship." "I will provide a tactical diversion," Niner announced, its shoulder-mounted cannon swiveled forward. "And what qualifies as a tactical diversion for you?" Milo asked. "The application of overwhelming and indiscriminate firepower," the bot replied, and opened fire. The concourse erupted into panic, while Tala laid down precise covering fire and Niner created a wall of noise and explosions. Milo and Crix sprinted for the cruiser.
"The lock requires a Class 4 encryption key,"
Crix chirped as he fiddled with the ship's ramp controls.
"It's a local override, not on the network,"
Milo grunted and shoved him aside.
"Gotta do this the old-fashioned way."
The process felt familiar, like he bypassed a stubborn ignition coil in an old ground hauler. He jammed his wrench into the control panel's seam, pried it open, and yanked a handful of wires. He sparked 2 of them together. The ramp hissed down. They scrambled aboard. The cockpit was dark, the systems cold. Milo threw himself into the pilot's seat. His hands moved across the console. He was a mechanic, not a pilot, but he knew engines. He bypassed safety regulations, rerouted power directly from the main reactor to the thrusters, and slammed the ignition. The cruiser roared to life and shook the docking bay. Tala and Niner scrambled up the ramp just as it began to retract, laser blasts stitched across their hull.
Do you even know how to fly this thing?
Tala screamed as she strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat. Milo wrestled with the controls. The ship lurched violently as it lifted off.
"Relax. I once drove a forklift for the whole summer. This is basically the same thing."
The ship shot out of the docking bay and scraped its wing on the frame with a horrible screech of metal. Niner's voice crackled over the internal comms from the gunnery station. Factoring in the pilot's complete lack of training and his over-reliance on Earth-based industrial vehicle analogs, all probability of survival has been revised to 3.1%.
Their stolen cruiser, which Crix had dramatically christened the Star Reaver, was a mess. It smoked, it sparked, and it bled vital fluids. Worse, it was low on a specific, rare type of hyperfuel component. They limped to the only port in the sector guaranteed to have it, Port Anarchy. It was a moon converted into a single planet-sized casino, run by a semi-independent branch of the Grave March Syndicate. It crawled with the worst people in the galaxy, which made it the perfect place to hide in plain sight.
They found a grimy cantina in the underbelly of the casino, a place called the Undulating Tentacle. The air was thick with smoke, cheap liquor, and desperation. Milo, Tala, and Niner, who wore a large cloak to disguise its warbot frame, took a booth in the back while Crix went off to procure the parts they needed. Procure means steal, doesn't it? Tala grumbled and took a long drink of a foul-smelling blue liquid. It means acquiring goods through non-traditional mercantile channels. Niner corrected her from across the table. Milo nursed his own drink, the crown now hidden under a beanie. The constant data feed had subsided into a low hum at the back of his mind. He found himself looking at Tala. In the dim, flickering light of the cantina, the hard lines of her face seemed softer. He noticed the way her forearms moved with an unconscious grace, even when she just lifted a glass. She caught him staring. "What?" she snapped. "Nothing," Milo said quickly and looked away. "Just thinking the whole day has been a lot." "You think?" Her voice was laced with sarcasm, but there was no real heat behind it. "You steal a magic hat from a galactic tyrant, start a one-man war, and hijack a military vessel. I'd say a lot is an understatement." "It's not a magic hat," Milo mumbled. "It's just advanced tech I don't understand." "Close enough." She took another drink. Her eyes scanned the room. "You got us into this, mechanic. You better have a plan for getting us out." Before Milo could formulate a witty, noncommittal response, a massive horned being loomed over their table. He was a bounty hunter. Milo could tell by the worn armor and the casual way he rested a hand on the giant blaster holstered at his hip. "Milo Cass," the bounty hunter growled, his voice a dry rasp like sandpaper on bone. "There's a price on your head big enough to buy this moon." He grinned and revealed rows of sharp teeth, metallic teeth, "and on the heads of your associates." Milo sighed and placed his glass down on the table with a soft click. "Can I just finish my drink first?" The bounty hunter's answer was an attempt to separate Milo's head from his shoulders. The undulating tentacle erupted into a full-scale brawl. Tala was a whirlwind of motion, a four-armed storm of brutal action. She used two arms to fight, one to disarm and the fourth to hold her drink steady. Crix, who had returned just in time for the violence, scurried under tables, liberated unattended credit chips, and occasionally bit someone's ankle. Milo was an improviser, not a fighter. He dodged a chair thrown at his head and ducked under it like a swinging hydraulic press he had failed to lock out. His eyes scanned for an advantage. A cleaning droid hummed obliviously in a corner. "No network access here," he thought. "Time for Plan B." He slid behind the bar, hot-wired the droid, and sent it careening into the middle of the fight. Its cleaning nozzles sprayed high-pressure, incredibly slippery industrial lubricant all over the floor. Suddenly, the brawl turned into a slapstick comedy of hardened killers who slipped and slid into each other like a cosmic ice show. The bounty hunter, who roared in frustration, managed to stay on his feet. He leveled his blaster at Milo. Before he could fire, Milo grabbed the first thing he could find, his trusty wrench, and threw it. It was a wild, desperate fling that happened to cling directly off a pressure-release valve on the Reforcer's chest plate. The valve fell. The bounty hunter's armor began to vent its coolant in a high-pressure shriek. It spun him around like an out-of-control top before he crashed into a stack of L kegs. The fight was over. The cantina was a wreck. Niner, who had remained perfectly still at their table throughout the chaos, finally spoke. "Analysis. The application of high-pressure industrial lubricant to flooring increased enemy incapacitation by 49%. The use of a standard-issue wrench as a percussive maintenance tool on enemy armor proved 12% more effective than standard blaster fire." A pause. "The outcome is illogical and therefore fascinating." News spread faster than a bad rumor. A human, a scrawny two-armed mechanic, who had walked into the lion's den, laughed in the tyrant's face, and walked out with his crown. The story became a legend overnight. On a desolate mining moon, a debt slave who worked a 14-hour shift saw the news on a hidden datapad. He looked up, a flicker of something new in his exhausted eyes as a syndicate overseer walked by. He quickly hit the device, but the image of Milo, defiant and crowned, was burned into his mind. In the graffiti-scarred alleyways of a conquered city planet, a splash of color appeared overnight. A stenciled image of the crown of Grave March, spray-painted directly over the snarling logo of the Grave March Syndicate. Two Vec rebels, who hid in an asteroid belt, listened to the panicked, confused chatter on the Syndicate comms channels. They heard whispers of chaos in the capital, of security grid failures, and bizarrely, of a fleet-wide mandate for new, shocking pink uniforms. They looked at each other, a slow, dangerous grin spread across their faces. The spark had been lit. Aboard their now repaired and refueled ship, which Milo had officially renamed the Forklift over Crix's dramatic protest, they intercepted a scrambled transmission. It was encrypted on a channel long thought dead. Niner decoded it. A face appeared on their main view screen, a grim-looking Vec general, her face scarred. Her armor bore the faded insignia of a free army that had been gone for decades. "To the one they call the Crown Bear," she was saying. Her voice was filled with a desperate weight. "We have heard the stories. We have seen the signs. For years we have fought in the shadows, a dying ember. You have fanned that ember into a flame. You are the leader we have awaited. We pledge all ships, all lives to your cause. Send us a sign. Give us our orders." The transmission ended. The cockpit was silent. Milo stared at the screen, his face pale. "Leader?" he croaked. "Leader? I'm a mechanic. My grand plan was to sell the crown to the highest bidder and retire on a beach somewhere with decent plumbing." Tala turned in her chair and grabbed him by the front of his jacket. She pulled him close, her 4 eyes bored into his. Her voice was low and intense. "That plan is dead, Milo. Do you see what you've done? You didn't steal a hat. You stole their fear. You showed them that the Vraw can be humiliated, that the Syndicate can be defied. There's no beach for you anymore. This," she said, her grip tightened, "is the only way any of us get out of this alive." He looked into her eyes and saw past the cynicism to the fierce, burning spark she tried so hard to hide. He saw his own fear reflected there, but he also saw a strength he didn't know he possessed. For the first time, the weight of the crown felt like more than just dense metal. "Okay," Milo said and took a deep breath. "Okay, if I'm going to be a rebel leader, I'm going to do it my way. Niner, get me into the Syndicate's fleet central network." "Accessing," the bot intoned. "Their military-grade firewalls are formidable." "I'm not trying to crack their weapon systems," Milo said as he leaned over the console. "I'm not an admiral, I'm a mechanic. I'm looking for the leaky pipes, the rusty bolts, the bureaucratic crap that makes the whole machine seize up." Guided by Niner, he dove into the bureaucratic guts of the Grave March Syndicate. He found the fleet-wide uniform procurement directives. With a few keystrokes, he used his administrator access to spoof a high-priority encrypted order directly from Vraw's personal channel. The order, effective immediately. All Syndicate uniforms were to be replaced with a new, high-visibility model. Color, shocking pink. The directive cited a non-existent study about its positive psychological impact on morale. Next, he accessed the low-level systems registry, the master password file for everything from automated janitorial droids to gallery food synthesizers. He couldn't crack the high-level military codes, but this was easy. He changed the master password for every non-critical network system in the entire Syndicate. The new password, Vral is a chump. Across dozens of star systems, chaos ensued. Janitors were locked out of supply closets. Cooks couldn't get the nutrient paste dispensers to work. Automated maintenance routines failed and caused toilets to back up on capital ships. The Syndicate's massive, intimidating war machine was paralyzed by a galaxy-spanning IT meltdown and a sudden, inexplicable shortage of black uniforms. The forklift hung in the silent darkness of space. It orbited just outside the detection grid of the Grave March Citadel. Below them, the planet glittered, a jewel of tyranny. Inside the cockpit, the crew prepared for the final, insane gamble. Milo stood alone for a moment and stared at the crown of Grave March where it rested on a console. Its green light pulsed softly, like a sleeping heart. The weight of it felt immense now, and it had nothing to do with graviton alloys. Tala came and stood beside him, her presence a quiet comfort. "You know," Milo said. He didn't look at her. "For about 5 minutes back there in that cantina, I actually had a plan. It involved a beach, a lot of cheap booze, and never seeing a wrench again. This is way over my pay grade." Tala offered no empty platitudes. She put one of her hands on his shoulder, her grip firm and steady. "Too late to clock out now, mechanic." He looked at her then, really looked at her. He saw the trust in her eyes, the shared insanity of their situation. He reached up and placed a hand over hers. It was a simpler and more profound gesture than romance. It was an admission. "We're in this together." He took a deep breath, picked up the crown, and settled it on his head. The cool rush of data filled his mind, no longer an alien intrusion, but a familiar tool. "All right," he said as he turned to the rest of the crew. "Let's go knock the big guy off his ugly gold chair." The forklift drove straight for the Grave March Citadel. They used the fleet-wide chaos as cover. They skipped stealth and subtlety. Their goal was simple, direct, and profoundly stupid. Cut the head off the snake. Anti-aircraft batteries, their targeting systems confused by conflicting reports and a password lockout on their diagnostic software, fired erratically. Patrol ships, many now a garish shade of pink, were too busy with their own internal meltdowns to mount an effective defense. They flew straight for Vral's fortress, straight for the throne room. "Brace for impact!" Milo yelled. He didn't try to land. He crashed. The forklift tore through the upper levels of the palace, a screaming meteor of repurposed metal and pure defiance. It came to a screeching halt in the middle of the ruined throne room. Milo stumbled out of the wreckage, wrench in hand, his face smeared with soot and blood. "Time to make this public," he muttered. He focused his will and used the crown's root access not as a broadcast tool, but as a key to the entire Syndicate's media empire. "Administrator," Niner's voice crackled from the ship's comms. "You have successfully accessed the Grave March Citadel HoloNet broadcast network. All security feeds from this location are now live on every official Syndicate channel. The galaxy is watching." Across the debris-strewn room, King Vral rose to his full, terrifying height. His fine uniform was torn, his face a mask of fury.
"You!"
he roared. His voice shook the broken room.
"You are no king! You are a pest! A joke!"
Milo wiped a trickle of blood from his lip with the back of his hand. He gave a tired, bloody grin. "Yeah," he said, his voice raspy but clear enough for every microphone to pick up. "But I'm the joke everyone's laughing with, not at." Vral charged. The brawl that followed was a behemoth against a gnat. Milo survived. He dodged, he weaved, and he used his smaller size to his advantage. He used the crown's network control as a weapon, made the lights flicker and spasm, caused chunks of the ceiling to rain down and Vral's own automated defenses to intermittently tag him as a hostile. He kicked a tray of Vral's abandoned gold-plated fruit to make the king slip on a space banana. His entire goal was to exhaust the raging tyrant, to outlast him, to wait for that one single opening. "My calculations," Niner's voice announced calmly and broadcast for all to hear, "suggest a 0.00
0.02% chance of victory for the human. I am, for reasons my logic core cannot parse, intrigued.
Vral, maddened by the tiny human's refusal to die, overextended with a wild swing. It was the opening Milo awaited. He swung his wrench with the same efficient motion he'd used 1,000 times to unstick a faulty gear. The heavy tool connected with Vral's knee joint with a sickening crunch of metal and bone. The king screamed and crumpled, his leg buckled beneath him, a machine disabled. Milo stood over the fallen tyrant, breathing heavily. He reached up, ripped the crown from his own head, and looked down at the furious, defeated king. "Told Milo panted. "Cardio." He slammed the crown onto Vral's massive chest. The crown, now separated from its authorized user, detected an unauthorized cognitive signature that tried to interface with it. Its ultimate security measure, the synaptic scrambler, activated without mercy. Vral's eyes went wide as his own symbol of power discharged a lethal energy surge directly into his nervous system. He convulsed once, and then was still. In the silence that followed, rebel ships began to land in the palace courtyard. The Vec general was the first to enter the throne room. Her soldiers flanked her. She looked at the dead king, at the victorious, exhausted human, and at the crown on Vral's chest. Her soldiers retrieved it, polished it, and presented it to Milo on a silk cushion. "You have done the impossible," the general said, her voice filled with awe. "You have freed us all. It is only right that you should wear it, King Milo." Milo looked at the crown, then at the general's hopeful face. He laughed. It was a raw, tired, genuine sound. He walked over and took the crown from the cushion. He felt its weight, its power, for a final moment. "No," he said and shook his head. "I'm not built for politics. I'm built for running, drinking, and blowing things up." He held the crown out to the general. "Here, you look like you know what to do with this. It gives me a headache." He gently dropped the priceless, galaxy-altering artifact into her waiting, outstretched hands. The transfer of the weight was a transfer of responsibility he was more than happy to make. He turned and looked back at the wreckage of the forklift, where Tala, Crix, and Niner emerged. His crew. His family. "Hey, thanks for the adventure." The crew stood on the bridge of their ship, the now repaired and heavily modified forklift. Patches of mismatched metal covered the hull, and the cockpit smelled faintly of burnt wiring and victory. Tala argued with Milo over a star map, her hands on her hips. Niner calmly calculated the odds of their next harebrained scheme succeeding. Crix, meanwhile, polished a massive jewel-encrusted gear stick he had liberated from Vral's throne. It was gaudy, ridiculous, and worth a fortune. He grinned and looked at his bickering, chaotic family. With a decisive shove, he jammed the gear stick into the ship's console, a replacement for their broken one. It looked absurdly out of place. It was perfect.
"First round's on me at the next stop,"
his translator chirped. Milo grinned at Tala, who rolled her eyes but couldn't hide a small smile. He engaged the new, ostentatious hyperdrive control. The stars streaked to lines, and the forklift warped away. They left behind a galaxy in turmoil and rebirth. A galaxy where on countless worlds their faces were plastered on wanted for heroism posters, forever remembered as the scrappy, unlikely legends who started it all with a bad joke and a very heavy hat.